Hello, and welcome to Of Peace and Podcasts. I'm your host, Aaron Gorley, and this is a podcast where you get to listen to me read my novel of Peace and Precipitation, and then afterwards hear some various insights about the inspirations, writing, thoughts on life, and really just thoughts on the meaning of life, and all kinds of other interesting things like that. And today we're going to be into chapter 5. It's a pretty short chapter, and it kind of goes into some time where our character Jen is she's interacting with this crush that she has, and she kind of bored in school and thinking about all kinds of crazy things when she was bored. And that is it. And the beautiful thing about this podcast, as always, is that, you can just listen to the audiobook portion, or you can wait and hear the life-changing commentary about the story after that, and various other witty and interesting things. And we are going to get right to it. Chapter 5. Mr. Wells' 5th period biology class went on longer than normal. Mr. Wells seemed to have a gift for boredom. If Jen's mind could think past the mind-numbing monotone voice itself, it was really almost humorous how boring he was. Jen wondered, is Mr. Wells trying to bore the class brain dead? How could he not be? Can anyone have that little self-awareness? Isn't there a public speaking classes that teachers have to take somewhere along the way? How did Mr. Wells pass? Maybe Mr. Wells, after years of teaching kids who gave him trouble, decided, since corporal punishment had been banished in public schools, that the only way he could get back at the students was to purposely and sadistically bore students till their brains were on the verge of cerebral hemorrhaging, and that Mr. Wells was really a maniacal evil genius, and that underneath his lavishly plain exterior and uncanny monotony, he was really laughing with all the hearty enthusiasm of one of the greatest villains of all time. Wow. Jen shook her head. I must be bored. People who are enjoying themselves in class don't have such vivid daydreams of their teachers being evil maniacal geniuses. If only Morgan was in this class. Everything is always better when Morgan is around. Together, Morgan and I could even survive a class with Mr. Wells. Jen accidentally let out an audible sigh, causing bored classmates to glance over her. Now all she could do is sit and stare at Drake Ferguson. Drake Ferguson played soccer and was considered to be one of the most popular kids in school, even though he was only a freshman. He looked as if he walked out of a magazine. He was decently tall, with a muscular frame, and that made him seem older than 15. He was so beautiful in a handsome way that it made Jen almost despise him. He had dirty blonde hair that was flipped up in a stylish fashion, and the most uniform and perfect face and skin. If it weren't for his sharp wit that made him stand out from the other popular kids, Jen probably wouldn't pay any attention to him at all. Jen rarely had chance to talk to him directly. She and he did have a few flirty little chats, as Morgan called them in class. Part of Jen really wished that they were flirting, but she doubted that Drake had any interest in her at all. He had just about every pretty girl in the freshman class, and many in older grades constantly giggling about him and suggesting they hang out on the weekends. 3 weeks into the school year, and already there were always girls babbling on about him. Drake winked at me. Drake's so dreamy. Drake bumped into me. Drake handed me a plastic fork. Lame. Those girls need to get a life. At least when I talk to him, I know he is not really in love with me. It was just last period when Jen overheard two of the more loquacious girls in her class talking about how Haley Roberts, a junior popular girl extraordinaire, was going to take Drake to homecoming, which had been the first time the freshman boy had gone with upperclassman girl in school history or something, blah, 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 blah. It's all nonsense, Jen thought. Yet, she could see what Haley Roberts saw in him. There was something about him that made him seem different. It wasn't that he wasn't shallow. He was. But he was also intelligent, funny, and very confident and quick on his feet. And his occasional deep thoughts and insights in class, however fabricated they may be, made his teachers think highly of him, and helped Jen think that maybe there was something deeper than his Abercrombie model exterior. Class was almost over. Mr. Wells was almost finished talking. Jen wasn't sure she caught anything that he said. As she glanced around the room, it was clear no one else was listening either. Mr. Wells probably doesn't even know what he's saying. He's probably daydreaming of some scientist woman that he met in last year's biology teacher conference who wore thicker glasses than he did. Yuck. Ugh, why am I thinking about Mr. Wells' romantic life? Yuck, I must be bored. Okay, 4 minutes left. Okay, he's finally finishing. Phew, that was painful. Mr. Wells finished the assignment. Finished giving the assignment, the next chapter in their biology book. Jen read the biology chapters religiously in order to catch up with what she would inevitably miss in the lectures. As Mr. Wells returned to his desk, students began to talk among themselves. Drake, who usually sat exactly 2 rows over and 2 seats up from Jen, not that Jen ever noticed, came and sat directly in front of her to talk to Seth Wade, a carefree middle defender from the soccer team who sat in the next row. Jen couldn't help but listen and pretend not to be listening, while she nonchalantly began running her fingers through her hair, fixing any strays. Seth, can you believe how much Coach made us run yesterday? Yeah, that was bullshit. Yeah, we weren't even the ones that made those penalties. Yeah, we're punished because Marcus and Corey can't play soccer? I know, right? BS. Hey, Jen, did you get that English reading done? Jen was startled by Drake suddenly addressing her. Wait, what? Oh, the English assignment. Yeah, I finished it. Jen answered in an oddly breathy manner that slowly faded into her normal voice, after she noticed how strangely she was talking. Yeah, what was the story about? I didn't get a chance to read it. We had a crazy soccer practice last night. Yeah, it was just about this old guy who imagined himself doing all these exciting things, though in reality, he was really old and he had to have his wife help him with everything. It was okay. So he just imagined himself doing all these things. Yeah, he imagined himself he was a superhero or something, but he could barely walk in real life. Okay. All right, thanks, Jen. I heard we're going to have a quiz. As he quickly and casually rested his hand on hers for a second, he looked right at her smiling and said, You're a lifesaver, before turning back to Seth as the bell rang. This sent Jen's mind whirling while a smile broke out across her face and butterflies took flight in her stomach. What did he mean by touching my hand? Does he like me? Jen, it's Drake Ferguson. Every girl in school wants him. He's not going to pick you. He did just touch my hand, though. I don't even think he meant anything by it, but it felt really nice. I couldn't even imagine having him as my bae. Every girl in school would be so jealous. You're getting ahead of yourself, Jen. He touched her hand. He didn't take it in marriage. And that was chapter 5. All right, like I said, it's a pretty short chapter, just a few pages. Kind of introduces the character of Drake that is a reoccurring character. And yeah, I mean, we'll hear from, he's not a huge character, but he's reoccurring. And, I wrote that a couple ways. It's really funny is that I totally used to do that in school. I, was always, pretty bright and, I got good grades and everything, but I definitely didn't always put forth the effort with my homework and studying as I probably should in high school and college. So I would totally try to get intel from people about assignments. I would be like, hey, what was going on with that assignment? I heard you had that class. What was the class about? What was the reading? I would totally ask people about what the reading was about. Could they summarize it? And then I would try to skim through the story myself to to get an idea, and I would totally do that completely. That was definitely a thing that I did. So yeah, but I mean, so a little bit in that character, the way it was written is similar to my experiences. But I was not like Drake in the fact that I was the most handsome guy in school and stuff like that, to where I had every single girl in the whole school crushing on me. It was not like that at all. It's funny looking back, I really idolized as a kid, probably preteen, probably preteen through middle school and then even some high school. I really like idolized characters from like stories like, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, even though that movie came out when I was like 5. So it's not like that was like a really recent thing, but that was an old movie I would watch, when I was in middle school, like as a preteen and in early high school. And I used to watch Saved by the Bell. I know I'm like dating myself so much, like the original Saved by the Bell. And I always loved like Zach Morris. And I love how like Zach Morris and like Ferris Bueller were like these like charming, humorous, like quick-witted people that would just like charm their way out of trouble all the time. And and they would like flirt with everybody and everything like that. So I thought that was so cool, and I was like, I've always been pretty quick-witted for the most part, and stuff like that. And I kind of just like went with that and would try to be in high school and like college, just be like this like charming, like funny, kind of larger than life character a little bit. I don't know if I always pulled that off. Sometimes I just look like an idiot, but yeah, it's funny. I definitely would always have a few girls that were kind of crushing on me and everything, and I was super charming and funny with them and stuff like that. But then I would actually like a girl, and it was completely different experience. like all of the charm and humor and quick wit would just like go out the door when I actually liked a girl. Like I would just have like these weird like awkward conversations that just were not at all like I was like the rest of the time. The rest of the time I was a little crazy and like funny and like somewhat interesting. But if I really liked a girl, I just would just be so awkward and just say the weirdest stuff, and afterwards I'd be like, why did I say that? It's so weird. And maybe I don't know, probably a lot of people just would think that all the time with me, but I don't know, just like I would be like that. I would just get so, I don't know, something about a pretty girl, a girl I liked, that just I would get just so weird and awkward around that. It's amazing that it worked out. It's funny, when I met my wife, and some of you probably heard me the story, but like, I met her, and when I first met her, I first saw her, she was singing at a church, and if you know my wife at all, she has a beautiful voice, and she is a very talented worship leader and songwriting. And when I met her, that's what she was doing. She was singing. She sounded beautiful, and I was like, dang, look at that girl up there. I'm like in church, like I'm supposed to be. I remember even thinking to myself, like, all right, Aaron, try to, we're here to, think about God, not about the pretty girl up there. Like try to keep your mind right. And I was semi-successful at that. And I remember just trying to, talk to this girl and not, just kind of get to know her and everything like that. And, she had a lot of friends and fans and boys that were crushing on her, young men, I should say. Because we were like in our 20s at the time. So she had a lot of young men that were crushing her and stuff. And I just never got the chance to like talk to her. Like I always try to, I definitely was interested in her, but like I didn't really know her. So I didn't really, I always kind of wanted to, by the time I was that in my mid to late 20s, I definitely was at the point where I wanted to kind of get to know someone a little bit before I dated them, just because, I didn't want to waste time, like, and then, going out on dates and find out they're an idiot kind of thing. I wanted to kind of like know the person. But with this girl, it's like, man, I never get a chance to like talk to her, So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to ask this girl out. And then, yeah, it was just something that, I was way more nervous about that than normal life when I was a little bit crazy and all that. And I remember like having to literally like practice in front of the mirror so I could like, I like practice so I could like pull it off, like not being awkward and like, saying it confidently. I'm like, all right, I gotta be confident, And most of the time I was confident, I'm kind of relatively confident person and whatnot. But with this girl, I knew I was not going to be. So I'm like, all right, I gotta practice. And sure enough, like I met with her and I caught her in the hallway after church one day, and I was like, it's like, hey, why don't we go get coffee sometime, just me and you. Kind of thing. And she was like, yeah, And then she like ghosted me for like a week after that. But, at least in person she said yes. But apparently she was like, praying about getting relationships, stuff like that. So I guess we'll let that slide, because that's like a nice and a good thing that she does, because she's a good person like that. But anyway, so that's kind of how I met her. And I had a similar time in school where I would talk to people. And then when it was time for an actual talking to a girl that I liked, I got real weird. real fast. Another kind of funny thing that sort of happened that I want to kind of comment on in the story is that, so the story itself that Drake asked Jen about is based off this story, The Secret not wife, that'd be really interesting, Secret Wife of Walter Mitty. No, it's not that kind of story. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty by James Thurber. And the funny thing about that is that was a story we were totally supposed to read in high school, and I did not read it at all. In fact, it was exactly how it happened with Drake, is that we had like some test or quiz on it. I don't even think I ended up doing that well on it, but I had no idea what it was about, so I was asking my classmates, like, hey, what was the story about we're supposed to read? And I totally did the same exact thing. And I think I even like got the story wrong when I wrote it. I want to say like in the actual story, it's like a normal, like, you know, maybe middle-aged guy. And I think in the book I wrote it like he's an old guy that imagined himself doing like these superhero stuff. And it's just so ridiculous that I used the book that I never read as well as the story that explains someone else doing the exact same thing. So I did exactly what Drake did in the story. I did not read it and got the information from my classmates about that exact story. So maybe that's why I decided to use it, because it was so ridiculous that I did not do it as well. So, moral of the story, you should do your homework, kids. Do not do what I did and not read a story twice and then write about a story that I didn't read and then or allude to it, I guess. I thought it might be like, you know, maybe not super obvious it happened, but nonetheless, that was it. And it was kind of crazy that it went down like that. So, sorry, James Thurber. I didn't mean to mess up your story. Pretty much most of the chapter was just talking about that, and then obviously just being bored at school again. I think I probably maybe overkilled the whole idea of like teachers being boring at school, but I really used to have some kind of boring teachers, and I'm sure other people have had that as well. I've had really good teachers too. Don't get me wrong. Not some of the teachers like I love, you know, listening to every day and like stuff like that and having in class, but I did have some boring ones as well. And I don't know. I think that's kind of a big deal a little bit, because if your delivery is super bad, you could be an excellent teacher, but if you deliver your information in such a way where your students stop listening because they're so bored, which is almost harder and harder these days because everyone's attention span is like so short. But if your delivery is really bad, it can really make learning very hard and teaching very hard. So I know for me, like I'm always kind of monitoring my students, be like, are they getting it? Do they look like they're alive still? And stuff like that. So I try to make it as interesting as possible. I always joke with my like students that I teach like in the evening, in ESL classes and everything. I joke with them and kind of say, you know, hey, I was like you know, hey, like teaching in the evening is 40% entertainment and 60% teaching, because I have to make sure you guys don't fall asleep on me, because it's very, very easy for that to happen in the evening when everyone's tired and stuff like that. So try to make things as interesting as possible. All right, so that is pretty much all of Chapter 5. And next time we'll be into Chapter 6, which is a little preview. It's going to be about Jen trying out for the school play and different things like that. So I'll be starting a new adventure in Jen's life, her play adventures and the plays in the theater, assuming that she gets into the play. You know, I don't want to get ahead of myself and give it away or anything, but we'll have to see kind of how that happens and different things like that, and then also maybe some friendships starting to break apart a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how all that happens, or at least I hope you're interested in it. Well, thank you very much for listening to A Piece in Podcasts, and have a great day.